Hello all, welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. And today we are officially taking a trip to Jacobs Cove after the defeat of the Destroyer. And, well, I think Claptrap will actually do a better job describing what's going on here than I ever could. And so, without further ado, Claptrap, if you will.
Greetings, misinformed zombie fodder. I am not affiliated with the Jacobs Corporation, but they've hacked me to tell people like you that they would appreciate some assistance with the overwhelming situation with the living impaired. I should warn you, though, that they'll suck your brain out of your cranial cavity like a crappuccino if you get too close. If you'd still like to help, I suggest you turn on the town's defenses. Otherwise, crappuccino. Toodles!
Okay, that was not as helpful as I thought it would be. Long story short here, we are entering what would effectively be a zombie apocalypse of Jacobs Cove. A very good doctor has taken the liberty of helping the locals with being living impaired, and, well, at this point in time, we are going to be aiming to beat the Jacobs Cove DLC of Borderlands 1 without firing a single bullet. And the way you do that is the same way we've done everything up to this point. With a pair of arms, a couple of cannons, and maybe a couple hams strapped to the end of them just for good measure. And reality is, Mr. Brick here is going to be the one who shows off just what can happen should you get too close to somebody who knows how to throw a punch. Now, I'll admit that this DLC is one that has both gotten better and worse for me over the years of playing this game. Generally speaking, the Dr. Ned DLC is pretty well just a simple run-of-the-mill run from point A to point B, beat up a couple zombies, you know. It's meant to be a grand old time. It's meant to add more flavor to the world of Borderlands, which is great. But in the era that this game came out in the early to mid-2000s, in the 2000s, before the 2010s, Borderlands had a lot going for it, and every other game out there had some form of a zombie mode or zombie DLC. This is just how video games worked at the time. And sometimes that was to the benefit of the players, sometimes not so much. In the case of Borderlands, I would say that this is one that does what it intends to do quite well, whether or not it's the perfect blend of chaos and destruction that I would expect. I'll leave that to you to decide. But overall, Borderlands, I think, does an okay job with this. The idea of it being that
I'm sure glad I'm not made of tasty flesh like you.
the entire point was that in this DLC was not founded off of nothing. It was the type of DLC that was built.
Safe for now, but if you're really going to solve the zombie infestation, you're gonna need to talk to Dr. Ned. He's been trying to fix the problem, and I'm sure he could use a hand. You'll find him at his office down on the docks. I'll open the waterfront gate so you can be on your way. Let's go!
The DLC as a whole doesn't have just no explanation. Actually, quite the opposite. This is probably the most fleshed out zombie story mode of any video game of the 2000s, and that's really saying something.
Another poor adventurer is going to be zombie food.
If you look at games of the era, the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and those types of games at the time, Borderlands actually has much more information than most. Effectively, what happens is that Dr. Ned is a fantastic doctor. But as a doctor, he's kind of does his job a little too well. some people were getting sick, and he developed a cure for this sickness, only for people to begin to walk again. Realizing that he had created a cure for effectively death, he spread it around to the people around him as best he could. And of course, as the zombies continue to do what zombies do, biting and attacking the next batch of people around them, really, realistically speaking, the entirety of Jacob's Cove started getting sick, started dying, started rising, started becoming an undead and, dare I say, near mindless horde. And so, the crux of this DLC is that you, as a fearless traveler, end up finding your way to Jacob's Cove, which is great. But also, you now have to clean up the mess that somebody else started. Now, for the duration of this DLC, I'll be aiming to complete every single side mission, just kind of more or less to prove a point that it can be done without firing a single bullet. While we're here, I also will not be throwing any grenades, as, let's be real, grenades are just a type of ammo by a different name. Therefore, grenades, bullets, rockets, you name it, if it is not strapped to Brick's arms, it's illegal for this run. So, effectively, we are going to do the very thing that Claptrap said not to do. We need to get within arm's reach of every single enemy in Jacob's Cove. And if it was any other character, I believe that this would be a very bad decision, but this is Brick we're talking about. He's fine. So, in the second region that you're going to come to, Hallow's End, there are a few major stopping points that we're going to have to visit. Number one is we're going to be dealing with Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is one of the side bosses of this area, one of like 4 in the entire DLC. And he is completely optional. You don't need to fight him to complete the DLC's storyline. But in my mind, beating as many of these side bosses as possible is more important than you might think. See, at the moment we're sitting at about level 36. At max level, we'd be looking at about level 40. The DLCs as a whole tend to lean towards the player's level as a baseline. And so, as long as you're, I think, level 10, the game will match your level or better, which is great. But the reason I want to bring this up as as specific as I can is because we're going into a series of high-end DLC battles in what I would consider to be a relatively short amount of time. See, unlike when I attempted the Deathless run of Borderlands with Mordecai, I'm intending to also go through Mad Moxie's Underdome Riot. That DLC is effectively just an arena battle, but effectively 25 waves of enemies versus the one Vault Hunter is kind of how it boils down. I like the idea behind messing around and just seeing how far we can get without ever throwing a grenade or shooting a bullet, simply because it's very much the opposite of what Borderlands was designed to be. Borderlands is a looter-shooter. It is intended to be based around, oh, I fight enemy, I grab enemy weapon, I add it to my arsenal. And slowly but surely, your character not only becomes more adept with their own individual skills, but also with the various tools that they gain access to. In the case of Borderlands being this chaotic mess of a game, that's the point I want to get across, is that the game was designed specifically with a certain end goal in mind. Being able to absolutely obliterate anything with a million guns. We're not touching the guns this run. We haven't touched guns this entire game so far, and even beat up to the destroyer and completed every side mission in the main game. Therefore, the only thing left to do are the 4 DLC. Jakobs Cove, being the one where all the enemies kind of come right to you, is the one that I think will be the easiest of the 4. Now, part of the reason I think this will be the easiest of the 4 is that Brick really doesn't take all that much damage comparatively to how much he dishes out. So yes, there are going to be times where I'm going to get knee-deep in situations I can't easily get myself out of. But comparing what could happen to what inevitably does, I believe that Brick has the potential to hold out in virtually any circumstance in Jakobs Cove. I can't say the same thing for the General Knox's Armory, nor can I say the same thing for the battle against the Claptrap army. Because the various Claptrap armies and whatnot all have range on their side. And sure, absolutely, do they have the defenses that I think they would need to beat Brick? Not really. But I also believe that at any point in time, should they actually step up their game, I'm going to be knee-deep in a situation I can't easily get away from. Also doesn't help that one of those 2 DLCs has a heavy focus on vehicles, and we already know how that goes. Bad flashbacks of Mad Mel coming up. Anywho, the second thing that I was supposed to mention earlier that I never really got around to is actually right nearby. It is an enemy or entity that is a sight for sore eyes. Unfortunately, all I can think about these days is brains, but at one point he used to only talk about skags. Hated skags with a fiery passion, would do anything and everything in his power to keep the skags away from his food. And now, he was zombie. Now, there's a part of me that questions a little bit whether or not the Borderlands DLCs are actually canon. See, some are and some are obviously not. If you look at the zombie island of Dr. Ned and Jakobs Cove as a whole, it never gets mentioned again in Borderlands 2 or later, except for the major story points in other DLC that are questionable in terms of what is or is not canon as well. So, we found TK Baja's leg. Oh, I gotta grab the leg. You know, this is like the second or third time that we've had to deal with TK's leg. I think it's the second. Anywho, TK Baja can definitely cough up a brain. He is a zombie now, which is great because he was originally very dead. And so we can say without a shadow of doubt that TK lives. But if TK lives, then we gotta feed him, because he ain't walking out there on his own. He forgot how to use his prosthetic. So, we're gonna go around, we're gonna find some zomboid brains, we're going to haul them back, give them back to TK, and pretend that we are not just grabbing maggot-filled brains for the sake of grabbing brains. So, Jakobs Cove has a series of side quests that I personally dislike. And it is the TK Baja side quests. See, there are 4 quests altogether. The first one is just TK lives. And the second one is brains. You collect 10 brains from zombies you've defeated throughout your trek to get to him. Second one is brains. And you have to collect 25 brains to give back to TK Baha. The third one is brains, which you have to bring 100 back. The last of them is even longer in terms of the A's than the first 3 combined, and you have to bring 250 back to TK Baha. The reason why I dislike this is because, unlike a lot of the side quests that crop up that I tend to really enjoy, this series of side quests just feels a bit like padding, to be honest. Some of them are great. Some of them, like trying to figure out where the members of a 4 to 5 person group, or 4 person and a dog group of mystery solvers end up disappearing to. It's a pretty good nod to 80s, 90s cartoons. But this particular one is just collect a absurd number of stuff. And when you're done, take it back to TK. Okay, I've collected the stuff. Now what, TK? Collect more stuff. Okay, I'll collect more stuff, TK. Here's the stuff. I want more. You get where I'm coming from with this? So, the reason I like this kind of side quest is because it does give a little bit of busy work and a target to hit in your average everyday encounters. But I also dislike this because, unfortunately, while it does give you something to look for and something to aim for, it really struggles in the respecting the player's time part. So, a little bit about my initial attempt of playing through this entire game. I didn't know where TK Baha was, even. And I had finished off the entire DLC without figuring out where he lit, or without figuring out where he was at all. And it wasn't until I went back through every region trying to see what was going on, and I noticed this random yellow mark saying, hey, by the way, there's something over here. Did I necessarily need to notice it that way? No. But my point stands that if I hadn't come back and looked at all, it's a series of quests that I would have missed altogether. And it's a series of quests that the final layer can take up to 2.5 hours if you're inaccurate. Which is one of the problems we're going to be running into with Mr. Brick. Brick is strong. Brick has all kinds of raw power at his disposal. That's the word. He can absolutely knock teeth in. But to land a finishing blow as a critical hit with him jumping forward the way he does, at least based on my current build, means he is wildly inaccurate when it comes to fighting the average zombie and aiming for the head. Sometimes you can get lucky with it. Certain ones are really nice about having a particular lean to where they have their head and where you're aiming when you lunge / punch them. Others not so much. So we're not going to get a brain out of every single zomboid. Far from it, in fact. Which, again, sucks, because I'd like to get more. But, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. Anyways, we're heading into the pumpkin patch, as I believe the pumpkin patch is going to be... Well, I want to try to beat Pumpkinhead, and I don't necessarily know if I can. See, Pumpkinhead is one of those bosses that ordinarily I don't mind too much. A little bit on the harder side compared to many of the others, but he is more of a bulk brawny type character. He has absurdly high defensive capabilities and absurdly high offensive capabilities. you can't deal much damage to him no matter how you go about it. So your number one solution is either going to be keep him at a distance, or get as close and hopefully beat him down as quickly as possible. The other side of the problem is that he physically does not take any elemental damage at all. Shock damage does not work on him. Corrosion damage doesn't work on him. Fire is a no-go. And I thought maybe explosive damage, because explosive damage just is a splash damage type thing. But that also does nothing to Pumpkinhead. So effectively you are left with no option but raw power. Normally with Brick, raw power is perfectly fine. But we run into this beautiful problem where Brick's raw power is already being implemented in any elemental damage. So, really there is absolutely nothing that can stop you from dishing out maximal damage except for his raw defensive might. Which is to say, it might be a little while before I actually beat Pumpkinhead, because at this moment I don't think I have the raw power or the dexterity necessary to defeat this beastie. Maybe in day 2 or 3 or something, I don't know. Point being, Pumpkinhead is not looking very good right now. And at 15 damage per punch, Pumpkinhead and Brick are effectively even. And, oh, yep, there it is. Okay, we're just gonna reset quick, because I definitely cannot deal 90% of his health in the next 60 seconds. So we're just gonna turn on our explosive artifact, and we're gonna make our trek down towards the spooky treehouse, which is Dr. Ned's, not Dr. Zed's, very specific hideaway. His home away from home. His experiment zone, if you will. See, Dr. Ned is not necessarily a bad guy, but he devolves very quickly. It is noted that as soon as he pretty well discovers that he created zombies, he starts trying to solve the problem of them by trying to make a cure. But once his I'm dealing with making zombies cure is shown to be inaccurate or not work, he immediately says, I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna, be evil. Because evil for the sake of evil is kind of his thing, apparently. Dr. Ned is, in my opinion, of the various villains, probably the one that I relate to the least. But he is also one that I think has the most comedic side to his villain arc. Like, yeah, I accidentally created zombies because I'm too good of a doctor. I actually have my medical license. He's trying to help people, at least that's what he did initially. And then, oh, yeah, I created zombies, and then I created werewolves, and, now to think about it, Ben was a nice guy, and Frank just didn't quite do the trick. So he created a Frankenben, if you will, and he kind of went over the top as soon as he realized that he's got this mad scientist thing down packed. That's Dr. Ned in a nutshell. Perfect? No. Human? Most of the time. And the rest of the individuals that he kind of deals with, and that you deal with in the DLC, are effectively just the living impaired that were affected by his actions. Now, I mentioned that I liked this more than the average zombie something or another that showed up in the 2000s. And to a degree, I have to follow up on that statement. If you look at older games, I'm going to go back to the 90s really quick. 1990s Zelda Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time had the Redeads, a series of monsters that were of zombie-esque origin. They were freaky, they definitely gave people some nightmares, but they were located in a few very sparse locations. As an adult, they were in Castletown. As a child, they were in the Royal Grave. And I think they were also in the Shadow Temple and beneath the well. That's it. That is pretty well the only re-deads you would find in the entirety of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Terrifying, but didn't really have much of anything tied to them as far as the mode or explicit lore, aside from the fact that these are not actually humans, these are just constructions of black magic, if you will. But if you start looking at other games, and while I admit I'm going to be pointing at a game here that I don't necessarily have the full story for, I'm looking at Call of Duty. Now, Modern Warfare and Black Ops, to my understanding, did not have a story behind the zombies mode. What I do know is that the individuals involved in the Call of Duty Black Ops storyline of the zombie mode was that they had effectively created a means of time travel. But by creating said means of time travel had inevitably awakened this monstrous horde, if you will. And that's about it. That's all we really get. They are trying to figure out what's going on, not necessarily. They're trying to figure it out. They don't have the answers, and they're not giving them to you. Borderlands took it the direction of, this is not a survival mode. This is Borderlands as Borderlands has been since the very opening of the game. What makes this different is that your target is not other humans, it's not monsters, it's not creatures of chaotic design. It is undead zombies. And that is something that makes this particular section interesting to me. Because they could have gone a myriad of ways with it. But they went with these kind of the tried and true zombies mode, if you will. A DLC devoted almost exclusively to zombies and that kind of storyline. How did they come to be on Pandora, in Jakobs Cove in and of itself? Is it possible to get rid of them all? You don't really know. Reality is that you physically can't. I have a problem with it as well, in that Jakobs Cove technically has a section that is on the mainland. Old Haven becomes Dead Haven. So, with Dead Haven being a location in Borderlands 1, both a location in the main story and this DLC, it lends the idea that perhaps the zombies did never happen, that this is not canonical, or that it couldn't be cleared up. The other side is, or maybe it did get cleared up, and now what? I believe that it's more the former than the latter. That the zombie DLC is a thing, like storyline-wise, it never happened, but it is an interesting perspective on a what-if scenario, if you will. I like what-if scenarios. I like the idea of what if the bad guy wasn't the bad guy? What if the storyline went a different direction at this point in time? What if character A and B were trusted from the moment they arrived? What would happen? How would this be different than it was prior? I don't know. I can say that I think the Jakobs Cove DLC is not canon because I believe that the situations that you come across, the locations and everything and what's tied to that is not possible to say, hey, yeah, this is what happened kind of thing. It's impossible to backpedal. If zombies reach the mainland, it is impossible to backpedal and say, nope, they're not here anymore. So that's kind of my perspective on it. like it or don't. That's your perspective, or your choice. But that's kind of my opinion on it. Oh, I hope that doesn't reset everything. That would suck. But dying to some zombies in this mode isn't the end of the world.
There's a good chance you'll make it out alive.
I like a lot about this DLC. I dislike a lot about this DLC. And reality is that no matter what you do, no matter what a developer does, there's always going to be positives and negatives. And I need that to be very well openly stated before too long. Just because I have one or two complaints, gripes, or anything of that nature doesn't mean that everything I think of it is positive or negative. Reality is that everything is a shade of gray. There are some things that go well, there are some things that don't. There are some things, when viewed under a slightly different lens, could have a very different expectation applied to it. That's all. Anywho, we get to finally talk to Ned himself. And I like Ned. Ned's okay. For the most part.
I probably went about this all the wrong way. I'm a doctor. I make people better. I just wanted everyone to be okay. I made the zombies. I was never as good as my totally not made up brother Zed, and we're totally different people. Oh, I need a drink.
Dr. Ned is, well, exactly what he seems to be. Yeah, he's made a few mistakes. Anywho, we're gonna continue pretending that he is the good guy. You know him to be the villain. So, we're gonna go to the next region. And once we hit the next region, we are going to effectively do a skag hunt, if you will. And before we do that, we're gonna hand some brains in to our dear friend, Mr. TK Baha. Now, like I said, there's a lot of this DLC that feels a bit like busy work. And this is kind of one of those things where you have to go back to TK every 25 to 100-ish zombies defeated. Sometimes that's not all that bad. 25 to 100, that could be, that's a trip around Hallow's End. That's a trip around a section of the world. But once you hit that 100 to 250 range, it starts getting absurd what it is actually asking of you to achieve those achieve those runbacks, so to speak. Anyways, with all that being said, we're gonna toss this in, talk to TK, and then we're gonna pack it in for the day. Level 37. Huh. Well, we might actually have a little bit more to do next time. Now, with level 37, we should, theoretically, be able to fight a certain entity on more even basis. And if we can do that, well, I mean, why wouldn't we? That just seems like the best plan to me. So we're gonna go and fight Pumpkinhead, and probably continue with the DLC as the best we can, and see where we go from there. Anyway, I like how there's like 17 different versions of the zombies, but I also think that the 17 different versions of the zombies basically boil down to, does it spit at you? Yes or no? Does it throw bombs at you? Yes or no? Is its head on straight so you can actually do damage to it? Yes or no? Now mix and match those as you see fit. The suicide zombies, the badass Tankensteins are the explosive ones. Most of them have some form of spitting up something or another that can slow you down. And there's another version that I think can... There's the midgets that jump at you, the psychos that run at you. I think that's all of them? There's like 7 or 8 varieties, but it's actually a lot more than you might think. Anywho, with all of that being said, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a sub, and I'll catch you next time. Until then, I hope you all have a good one.